Okay, so now that we've worked through a survey of the history and teachings of Buddhism, it's time to take a closer look at the relationship between this 2,500-year-old religion and the Baha'i Faith. As you will recall from class 3 of this part of the course, the eminent British Baha'i scholar Mujan Momin argues that Buddhism poses perhaps the greatest challenge to the Baha'i principle of the oneness of religion. And I thought we should reread his statement about that. So let's start at the top of our list with Margaret Boland. And I'll just have to screen share this. Just hang on. There we go.
Perfect. So reading 1. Buddhism is, in a sense, the paradigmatic model of a religion which is far removed from the Abrahamic tradition and about which there is very little in the Baha'i scriptures to provide guidance. Many of the concepts in Buddhism appear to be very hard to reconcile with the teachings of the Abrahamic religions. Therefore, it's often stated that the case of Buddhism presents special problems for the Baha'i concept of the unity of religion. From Mojan Momin, the Baha'i approach to other religions, the example of Buddhism.
Okay, thank you. So some of the concepts that Buddhism does not include, which are common to the Judeo-Christian Islamic religions, are a belief in God, in the prophets, in a holy book, in sacred law, and in the existence of an individual self, among others. You will also recall Momin's claim that Baha'is often attempt to reformulate Buddhism in a manner conformable to the Baha'i faith, or at least to the Western conceptualization of the Baha'i faith that is accepted as the norm. I must say that I've myself seen evidence of this tendency in my own research. This prompted me to investigate Buddhism's history, beliefs, attitudes, and worldview from the inside, as far as I was able to. To me, this seems the natural way to proceed if one is striving to fully respect Shakyamuni Buddha's status as an independent manifestation of God. So the question we Baha'is face is, how can we include a religion that has so few of the hallmarks of what we ordinarily deem to be religious? How can we bring Buddhism into the outstretched arms of the Baha'i unity of religion without irreparably damaging it in the process? So one fundamental principle in the Baha'i faith is that truth is one. The religious truths that the founders of the various religions have proclaimed are in essence one, although they may manifest themselves in different forms. David Erickson, could you read the second one for us?
Yeah, okay, sure. Purge thy sight, therefore, from all earthly limitations, that thou mayest behold them all as the bearers of one name, the exponents of one cause, the manifestations of one self, and the revealers of one truth. Mahawala the Kitabi Ikan.
Okay, and maybe Belinda, you could just go right on to number 3.
Right there. Oh, okay. In like manner, truth is one, although its manifestations may be very different. Some men have eyes and see. These worship the sun, no matter from which point on the horizon it may dawn. And when the sun has left the winter sky to appear in the summer's one, they know how to find it again. Others are who worship only the spot from which the sun arose. And when it arises its in glory from another place, they remain in contemplation before the spot of the former rising. Alas, these men are deprived of the blessings of the sun. Those who in truth adore the sun itself will recognize it from whatsoever dawning place it may appear, and will straightway turn their faces to its radiance. This is Abdu'l-Baha Paris talks.
It's a beautiful, fairly simple image. It really conveys the truth of what he's saying. So the sources of the differences that appear to exist among the religions of the world are stated to be due to at least 3 factors. Let's look at this. So I'm going to ask that we read some of the supporting documents from the Baha'i writings for these 3 sources of religious differences. So first of all, prejudices in people's minds. So that's number 4, and maybe I will ask Lori if she would read that one for us. I'll just bring it up a bit.
Are you there, Laurie? Maybe
I
she's
know
not-
Lori has a sister who's ill in BC, so she may be on a call. I
She might be
don't know.
multitasking.
Okay, well, that's fine. We'll just come back to her. How about Ingrid?
Sure. So reading number 4, man must cut himself free from all prejudice and from the result of his own imagination, so that he may be able to search for truth unhindered. Truth is one in all religions, and by means of it, the unity of the world can be realized. All the peoples have a fundamental belief in common. Being one, truth cannot be divided, and the differences that appear to exist among the nations only result from their attachment to prejudice. If only men would search out truth, they would find themselves united. It's from Abdu'l-Baha, Paris Talks.
Okay, and I'd also ask you to read the next one, Ingrid, just while I have you there.
Yeah.
So this is related to the second difference between the religions, which is the different types of human mind. So number 5.
Number 5 is the differences among the religions of the world are due to the varying types of minds. And again, that's from Abdu'l-Baha, but this time selections from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mark, I've got to expostulate. That is an amazing statement. In reading number 4, I've never read that before. If I have, its significance didn't hit me. Truth is one in all religions, and by means of it, the unity of the world can be realized. So that means if everyone in the world recognizes the truth in the other faiths, other religions, the unity of the world can result from that alone. That's amazing.
Yep. So, yeah, that suggests that people need to find the truth in their own religion, and then once they've sort of stabilized themselves in that place, then they can help other people to recognize that truth in their own religions as well. And I think that's one of the tasks ahead of us as Baha'is, is to help other people to really identify what is the truth. And of course, that's a big question that needs a lot of sorting out, because there's a lot of, shall we say, surface meanings that get in the way of the deeper meaning, which is the one that's probably the truth. Anyway, okay. So Abdu'l-Baha maintains that one or other of the divine names holds sway over every individual, leading them to perceive their surroundings from a dualistic or monistic point of view. Now, this is from his commentary on the Islamic tradition, I Was a Hidden Treasure. So I'm wondering if Bill could read this one for us. It's number 6.
However, although he, the human being, is the dawning place of the manifestations of all the names and attributes, one of the divine names is manifested most strongly and appears most intensely in each person. Thus, his being originates from this name and returns to it. The summary of the matter is that some of the saints of God, since they have seen the rays of light of eternal beauty with the eye of perpetuity in the heights of transcendence, Tanza, freedom from defilement, purity, and the heaven of sanctity, Tagdis, praise and sanctify the essence of absolute unity above all of the stages, Shuana, that pertain to the world. For in the being of these heavenly figures, the names of sanctity and transcendence have shone forth, and some of the knowers of the hidden secrets are the manifestations of the names divinity and lordship. Thus it is that in this station they do not see the Lord of Lords without his subject creatures, nor the Creator without a creation, nor the all-knowing without the object of knowledge.
So what he's actually doing there is describing what we could call dualism and monism. So in the first case, if you are being led by that name of sanctity or transcendence, you see God as utterly transcendent from the world. No relationship whatsoever. And so that will mean lots of different things about how you interact with people and live your life, etc. And then there are other people who think more in terms of, or are attracted more to divinity or lordship. But those terms are relative. You only can be a lord if you have vassals or subjects. So the two are combined. And in that's really the meaning for monism, where there's only one reality, but it's shared by all the beings of the world as well as the divinity. Okay, thank you. So as I pointed out in class 8 of part 1 of this course, way back in December of 2020, Ibn Arabi referred to a similar point regarding human understandings of the names of God. You may recall that he distinguished between the names of incomparability and those of similarity. So let's look at the incomparability or Tanzi names. The names of majesties such as wrathful, independent, holy, glorified, king, and great emphasize the incomparability of God and his creation. From this perspective, creatures are insignificant and, relatively speaking, non-existent. Those people who give more weight to these names are exhibiting Tanzi. This term means to declare or to affirm that something is far away or free from something else. So in this case, it means to declare that God transcends any attribute or quality possessed by his creatures. Now, the other approach is similarity, which is tashbih. The names of beauty, such as gentle, merciful, compassionate, near, loving, forgiving, and kind, emphasize the similarity of God and his creatures. In this case, God turns his face towards the creatures to ensure their happiness. Those people who give more weight to the names of similarity are exhibiting what's called tashbih. This term means declaring or affirming that something is similar to something else. In this case, it means to maintain that a certain similarity can be found between God and creation. Okay, so all of that was a long discourse on the second of the three sources of religious differences. Okay, so now we'll switch to the third one, the social exigencies and conditions that pertained when the religion first appeared. Okie dokie, let's ask Joey if is she there yet? They were going to be a bit late.
Yeah, they haven't arrived yet.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, Jack, how about number 7 for us, please?
Unmute. There can be no doubt whatever. There can be no doubt whatever that the peoples of the world, of whatever race or religion, derive their inspiration from one heavenly source and are the subjects of one God. The difference between the ordinances under which they abide should be attributed to the varying requirements and exigencies of the age in which they were revealed. Baha'u'llah, Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, page 111.
Hmm. Okay. So these quotations from the Baha'i writings suggest that Baha'is and others should make the effort to investigate, reconcile, and bring together the differences among the doctrines of the world's religions. This is stated to be an important component in bringing about unity in the world. Now, in a lengthy passage of Paris Talks, Abdu'l-Baha addresses the question of reconciling the differences among the religions. He establishes 3 principles to be followed when investigating the truth of religious claims. Here they are. In this case, we're also going to bring up the full text of what he had to say, because this is so centrally important. So, first of all, we should be prepared to cast aside traditional forms and practices in the search for the inner truth of religion. So this is the point I was making earlier in response to Jack about the difference between surface activities and deep ones, deep meanings. So let's go back to the readings, and we need a reader for number 8. Okay, how about Zilda? I think I saw you early.
All consider themselves, respectively, the only guardians of the truth, and that every other religion is composed of errors. They themselves are right, all others are wrong. The Jews believe that they are the only possessors of the truth and condemn all other religions. The Christians affirm that their religion is the only true one, that all others are false. Likewise, the Buddhists and Mohammedans all limit themselves. If all condemn one another, where shall we search for truth? All contradicting one another, all cannot be true. If each believe his particular religion to be the only true one, he blinds his eyes to the truth in the others. If, for instance, a Jew is bound by the external practice of the religion of Israel, he does not permit himself to perceive that truth can exist in any other religion. It must be all contained in his own. We should therefore detach ourselves from the external forms and practices of religion. We must realize that these forms and practices, however beautiful, are but garments clothing the warm heart and the living limbs of divine truth. We must abandon the prejudices of tradition if we would succeed in finding the truth at the core of all religions.
Very nice. Thank you. Oh, sounds so easy when he explains it, but how are you going to get a dedicated Buddhist or a practicing Jew to give up the external forms and practices of religion? My sense is that the mystics in each of these traditions have already done that to a certain extent. By their inner journey, they have transcended some of those external practices. So they're well on the way, I think, to being able to perceive truth in other traditions. But the people on the surface are going to have a really hard time with this. Okay, the second item in this investigating reality, we should be prepared to cut ourselves free from all preconceived ideas and prejudices. Okay, these are all long, unfortunately, but they're worth it. How about Hangame? Would you like to read 9? I'll scroll as you go.
Thank you. It is therefore clear that in order to make any progress in the search after truth, we must relinquish superstition. If all seekers would follow this principle, they would obtain a clear vision of the truth. If 5 people meet together to seek for truth, they must begin by cutting themselves free from all their own special conditions and renouncing all preconceived ideas. In order to find truth, we must give up our prejudices, our own small, trivial notions. An open, receptive mind is essential. If our chalice is full of self, there is no room in it for the water of life. The fact that we imagine ourselves to be right and everybody else wrong is the greatest of all obstacles in the path towards unity. And unity is necessary if we would reach truth, for truth is one. Therefore, it is imperative that we should renounce our own particular prejudices and superstitions if we earnestly desire to seek the truth. Unless we make a distinction in our minds between dogma, superstition, and prejudice on the one hand, and truth on the other, we cannot succeed. When we are in earnest in our search for anything, we look for it everywhere. This principle we must carry out in our search for truth.
Oh, very nice. Thank you. As Hangame was reading, it made me realize that one of the suggestions in this passage is that we need to acquire humility. We need to strengthen our humbleness to be able to say, I'm not 100% sure that what I understand is true. You have to allow the possibility that you have something to learn, that you haven't got the full picture yet. That takes some real doing. It takes strength of personality. So many people cling to being right as a definition of themselves. And as he says, a chalice that's full of self won't accept any water. Okay, Bill, I see your hand up. What's happening?
So I was in previous reading, and I think reinforced by this, there was mention of separation of the prejudice of tradition, and this prejudice seems to be the bigger word. And I'm just wondering, is it considered that tradition implies a prejudice, or in other words, can we respect and perceive as valuable a tradition, and at the same time detach from the prejudice that tradition may also imply?
I think so, and I think the the idea to run with here, or to apply in this case, is the difference between the social teachings and spiritual teachings. You know, the spiritual teachings are said to be virtually the same in all religions. And so by realizing that the social teachings you were given at that particular period of history may not actually apply anymore. If a new manifestation has come along and abrogated them, overruled them, the chances are they were, if you hang on to them, they become a form of prejudice against the truth. There are obstacles that have to be overcome. Anybody else want to say anything on that score? Is that sufficient, Bill, or do you still have a question about it?
Yeah, I was just trying to tease apart from the Baha'i writings, prejudice from tradition, and because I think when you're saying this to non-Baha'is, tradition is we have a big prejudice. Everyone, I think, has a big prejudice about tradition, and that it is the cumulative experience of society, that results in how society that affects how society operates. And that's kind of what tradition is to people. So when we say the tradition of a faith, and we say that we should detach ourselves from that tradition or eschew that tradition, then I think we're providing a big challenge to the basic sense of identity that people have of themselves and the society from which they emanate, and that we need to be able to tease apart the prejudice that might cause pushes away from that those traditions may pushes away from truth from the tradition itself.
Yeah,
Okay.
could I add something?
Well,
to
no,
that?
David and Belinda have something first, Jack, and then you
Okay.
next.
Okay, I can't see who's got hand up.
Let me just stop sharing the screen there. Yeah, okay.
Basically, it was, I wanted to just say something along the same lines as what Bill was saying. The traditions and rituals that are practiced, say, in a Jewish family, community, and home are specific, and they serve a wonderful function because they give people something to do together. They draw people together. They connect people with their sense of the past, and they, as he said, reinforce identity, and we can safely admire and respect those things, but in a conversation, you would have to be very careful to not denigrate any of those traditions, but to respect what they do, because there's a tradition, there's a ritual, there's practices in every community that help to keep that community together and to keep people functioning, at least so they know how to talk to the person next to them. And but if we can separate ourselves from that sense and then show to other people that their traditions and rituals share something with others, and do so in an atmosphere of respect, that might be the first step toward actually getting people to realize that their traditions aren't necessarily the essence of their religion, because that's what happens. People, they this is something they can grasp, they can do. And it becomes very closely identified with the essence of their religion, and it's not. Anyway, probably
that's helpful. No, that's helpful. Okay, Jack, what were you going to say on this?
Well, I think Belinda and Bill have pointed to an important point here with Abdu'l-Baha's use of the word tradition, that very often we think of it as being something positive, as Belinda has explained, as Bill has explained. But in actual fact, if tradition were never opposed at some point, society would never change.
That's right.
Because everything that we do is traditional. So all of the great reformers, whether they were in the religious world or the secular world, even in science, had to go against prevailing opinion. So what, and Belinda's point is, well taken. You don't show disdain or disrespect. But what Abdu'l-Baha is asking us to do in the search for truth is to start over. And starting over means you have to be willing to question your own faith. That's part of the process. And of course, a lot of people do that. And they either, like, I'm in a progressive Christianity group, okay? And they are wonderful people, and I enjoy that group very much, and they welcome me as one of their own. but they jump around from church to church. A lot of them have tried many different churches because, they become dissatisfied with a certain church, so they try another church and this and that, and then they go on, looking around. They haven't come to the point yet, even though Gay and I presented them with the Baha'i faith, they haven't come around to seriously investigating the claims of Baha'u'llah yet. But anyway, so it's a subtle point, this thing about tradition. So I think the point is you have to be willing to question. Perhaps it's hyperbole Abdu'l-Baha is using there, I don't know. But you have to be willing to question. If people say, well, why do you do it this way? Well, because my father did it that way, and my father before me, and his father before him did it that way. Is that a good enough reason to keep observing it? Maybe there's something wrong with the way you're doing or what you're doing. So I think it's an important point, and the point has been made. And I think that's the point, that Abdu'l-Baha says there's something deeper at the heart of religion than the rituals, the traditions, the laws. And that is the mystical heart of the whole thing, the ethical and spiritual teachings, which are at the core of all the religions, because he says truth is one, spiritual truth is one. It may have different accents in different religions, but the spiritual truths or the ethical truths don't really contradict one another in the religions. They emphasize different accents on different spiritualities.
Yep.
That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, that's very good. I see Lori has something to contribute here.
I was just thinking that it's very difficult to sit down without prejudice to start that conversation with people. And traditions really are the way of connecting people. And so if you have your connections made with traditions of faith, it's going to be really hard to cast those aside, because that gives you a feeling of belonging and identity. So I think it's just a really difficult thing to do. And if we're not ready for that, it's better for me not to talk to people about, why don't you look at this? I had from a neighbor across the pathway, she gave me this beautiful Easter card, and then a cutout with some writings in. And I had to ask Jack, I said, what's she saying? And he says, well, it's evangelical. So basically, I guess that this was their biggest celebration and day. And, Jesus was the thing, and God loves me. And I think that's what it was, wasn't it, Jack? Yeah. So I didn't know what to do, because I had to respect her, and this is what she really believes in. She prays for me all the time, and I'm very grateful for that. I tried progressive revelation once, but that was not a good thing. So Jack sent me the writing from Baha'u'llah, how he praised Jesus. It's a beautiful writing. So I printed it out and put it inside
Very nice.
non-Easter card and left it on her doorstep. And now we can continue on with our friendship.
I like it. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it Belinda or David this time? It's David. Okay. Now we got to keep this fairly short, because I've only halfway through my stuff.
Okay. All right. I won't say anything.
That's short.
I think we need to clarify what is the meaning of tradition.
Well, I don't know if I really want to go there tonight. I know this is getting off the track, sort of, to tell you the truth.
I don't think
I have some important points to make that maybe will clarify what Abdu'l-Baha is talking about. So if you don't mind, I'd rather not go into any detail about tradition tonight. Is that all right?
Okay, let's motor.
David, are you all right with?
No, it's not all right, but it's okay. You're the boss.
Okay. Just so we have that understanding. Anyway, okay, so let's look at the third point. I have to bring up the chat or the screen sharing again. Investigating reality or religion. So the third thing is we should be prepared to accept the judgment of science and reason upon our conclusions. Science and religion are one, right? Or should be complementary. Okay, so where are we at? I see that Alan is here. Maybe we can ask Alan to read this one. Number 10.
Are you there, Alan?
Yes, I just had to get
Oh.
rid of. Oh, I haven't even got a picture. Isn't that strange? Okay, sorry. 10. Science must be accepted. No one truth can contradict another truth. Light is good in whatsoever lamp it is burning. A rose is beautiful in whatever garden it may bloom. A star has the same radiance if it shines from the east or from the west. Be free from prejudice, so you will love the sun of truth from whatsoever point on the horizon it may arise. You will realize that if the divine light of truth shine in Jesus Christ, it also shone in Moses and in Buddha. The earnest seeker will arrive at this truth. This is what is meant by search after truth. It means also that we must be willing to clear away all that we have previously learned, all that would clog our steps on the way to truth. We must not shrink, if necessary, from the beginning our education all over again. We must not allow our love for any one religion or any one personality to so blind our eyes that we become fettered by superstition. When we are freed from all these bonds, seeking with liberated minds, then shall we be able to arrive at our goal. Seek the truth. The truth shall make you free. So shall we see the truth in all religions, for truth is in all and truth is one.
Well, he's really made things pretty clear in those three quotations, I think. With these three principles in mind, Baha'i should strive to discover the unity underlying the differences, no matter how different Buddhist doctrines may appear to be from the Baha'i teachings. We must go beyond the surface differences and probe the spiritual depths below. Or to use another metaphor, we should try to rise above the morass of conflicting doctrinal claims and seek a vision that transcends and unifies the differing viewpoints. So I want to shift focus a little bit here and talk about ultimate reality. The religions of the world have differing ways of naming or describing ultimate reality. One of Baha'u'llah's key goals seems to have been to make abundantly clear to human beings that they are neither able to conceptualize its essential nature nor to enter into a direct relationship with it. Okay, and that's number 11. So, Joey maybe could read this one.
To every discerning and illuminated heart, it is evident that God, the unknowable essence, the divine being, is immensely exalted beyond every human attribute, such as corporeal existence, ascent and descent, egress and regress. Far be it from his glory that human tongue should adequately recount his praise, or that human heart comprehend his fathomless mystery. He is and hath ever been veiled in the ancient eternity of his essence, and will remain in his reality everlastingly hidden from the sight of men. No tie of direct intercourse can possibly bind him to his creatures. He standeth exalted beyond and above all separation and union, all proximity and remoteness. No sign can indicate his presence or his absence.
Okay. Baha'u'llah explains that any descriptions of ultimate reality that are given in or derived from the scriptures of earlier religions do not relate to that reality itself. Rather, they relate to the manifestation of ultimate reality. In other words, to the prophet founder of each particular religion. How about David Oak? Number 12.
Okay, here we go. All these descriptions, all these expressions of praise and glory refer to these holy manifestations. That is, every description, praise, name, or attribute of God that we mention applies to them, but no soul has ever fathomed the reality of the essence of the divinity so as to be able to intimate, describe, praise, or glorify it. Thus, all that the human reality knows, discovers, and understands of the names, attributes, and perfections of God refers to these holy manifestations and leads nowhere else. The way is cut off and all seeking rejected.
Okay, thank you.
Is that related to the teaching of the Sadratul Muntaha? You know, the
Yes.
tree in the road that you
Yep, that's the manifestation of God.
yeah.
There's no passing that. You cannot go beyond, even though everybody's talking about ultimate reality. They're all confused about what happens at that stage. They really cannot go beyond it. So Baha'u'llah and the Bab both make a great deal about this issue. They really underline it very strongly. You've been getting off the track. Even the Muslims, with their focus on the one God, got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So it's time for us to grow up and to understand what's being said to us here.
Mm-hmm.
The manifestation of God is as far as we can go. Do you want to say something about that, David?
No, that's fine.
Okay, I wasn't sure. You looked like you were ready to.
I'm just listening intently.
Okay, fair enough. So, similarly, the goal of attaining the state or station of the ultimate reality, or achieving union with that ultimate reality, is simply not possible. This goal must be adjusted to one of attaining the station of or union with the primal will, which is the first emanation from God, or to the manifestation of God, who is the manifestation of the names and attributes of God, rather than the manifestation of the Godhead itself. Okay, number 13. How about Marie?
For on that day all men will be brought before God, and will attain his presence, which meaneth appearance before him who is the tree of divine reality, and attainment unto his presence, inasmuch as it is not possible to appear before the most holy essence of God, nor is it conceivable to seek reunion with him. That which is feasible in the matter of appearance before him and of meeting him is attainment unto the primal tree. The Bab, selections from the writings of the Bab.
And that tree is the Sadratul Muntaha that David was just talking about. The tree beyond which there is no passing. So this point has finally become clear to me. I've been struggling with this for years. In the view of the Baha'i writings, the primal will is the impersonal God. while the manifestation of God is the personal God. Doesn't sound like much, but boy, that means a lot to me, struggling with what the relationship was between the primal will and the manifestations of God. They're really just two faces of the same thing. So we can thus see that all the metaphysical and theological speculations and doctrines that have arisen in other religions regarding God or the ultimate reality have been demoted or pushed down by Baha'u'llah. He asserts that these speculations and doctrines are not statements about the ultimate reality itself, but are actually about the first emanation of that reality, the primal will, which resides in Lahut, and its subsequent manifestations, the manifestations of God, who occupied Jabarut, Malakut, and Nasut. So, earlier this week I distributed 2 documents related to the 5 realms of God to refresh your memories of this important Baha'i cosmology. The first was created by Jack McLean many years ago, while the second is a partial list of equivalent terms for the 5 realms found in the Baha'i writings, as well in some of its predecessors. So here's Jack's wonderful diagram. So there is God as Lahut. And this is the first stage that manifests itself. Up above, God as Lahut is the inaccessible. That's truly ultimate reality. This line here indicates that there is no way for anything below that line to cross over to this. Underneath there are 4 realms of God, if you like. We've talked about this before. There's Lahut, and then Jabarut, Malakut, and Nasut. We're in Nasut most of the time. But occasionally, we have access to Malakut. And we do that mostly through our dreams, but also as we develop as spiritual beings, as we become more angelic, as we take on more divine names and attributes, we are rising into this realm. And it became clear from a eulogy that Abdu'l-Baha gave for Thomas Breakwell that the highest level we can ever attain as human beings is Jabarut. Even though Thomas Breakwell was a Baha'i for only a short period of time, he was so pure that he was able to ascend to this level, apparently. And that's on Abdu'l-Baha's say-so, not mine. So we've studied this before. So what I wanted to do is return back to oh, sorry, I'm not going to do that yet. Sorry. I brought forward this document I created several years ago when I was on a real kick trying to figure out the divine presences, these 5 levels. And so by reading Mujan Momin and other people, I was able to come up with this list of equivalents to Hahut, or Lahut, or Jabarut, Malakut, and Nasut. And you can see there's a predominance of Baha'i terminology, first of all. But there are also references to other religions or other concepts. So most specifically in Lahut, where people have thought that they were describing absolute reality. They were talking about God, but actually they were not talking about absolute reality as Baha'u'llah understands it. They were talking about the primal will, which is where this is where he lives in Lahut. It lives, I guess you'd say. But look at the names in Christianity, for instance, the Logos. In ancient philosophy, it was the nous, the only begotten Son, the speech of God, the command of God. And then in Judaism, Jehovah or Yahweh. If you look back at the Bible at all these terms, you can see that they're all referring to this Lahut, although they think they're talking about the utterly transcendent God. So this makes remarkable reading when you have time to really look at it. And even the terms that are used for Baha'u'llah, for instance, the manifestation of the self of God, that threw me for a long time. But this is really just another name of God. And the manifestations are capable of manifesting every single one of them, including all the divinity names. Anyway, I could go on and on, but I don't think it's going to help us tonight on this score. So let's go back here. So I wanted to talk about ultimate reality as it shows up in the different kinds of Buddhism. So in Theravada Buddhism, for instance, with Baha'u'llah's important correction in mind that we have to demote our understanding of God, let's compare the two main vehicles of Buddhism with his teachings. For Theravada Buddhism, the ultimate reality is nirvana. When nirvana is portrayed as a reality to the indescribable, unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, and unformed, this could well be a description of the ultimate reality as expressed by Baha'u'llah. However, when it's designated as a state which human beings achieve after they have extinguished the fires of all cravings, attachments, hatreds, and delusions, Baha'u'llah would maintain that this relates not to reaching the ultimate reality itself, but to the state of reunion with a reality that emanates from the ultimate reality. In other words, the primal will or the manifestation of God. So it's clear from the statements of the Buddha that this state of nirvana is one which is achievable here and now, during this lifetime. And this number 14 from the Dhammapada will say that. Maybe Harold could read this one for us.
Sages should cleanse themselves of what defiles the mind. Those who fully cultivate the factors of awakening, give up grasping, enjoy non-clinging, and have destroyed the toxins, are luminous and completely liberated in this life. The Buddha from the Dhammapada.
And notice that last phrase, in this life. So it's not something you have to wait for the next world to do. So such a description of the state of nirvana in which suffering or dukkha does not affect us parallels the description given by Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha of the goal of our spiritual endeavor. So number 15, maybe Linda Russell could read.
O son of worldliness, pleasant is the realm of being, wert thou to attain thereto. Glorious is the domain of eternity, shouldst thou pass beyond the world of mortality. Sweet is the holy ecstasy if thou drinkest of the mystic chalice from the hands of the celestial youth. Shouldst thou attain this station, thou wouldst be free from destruction and death, from toil and sin. Baha'u'llah, the hidden words of Baha'u'llah.
And maybe you could read 16 as well.
The spiritual kingdom never causes sadness. A man living with his thoughts in this kingdom knows perpetual joy. The ills all flesh is heir to do not pass him by, but they only touch the surface of his life. The depths are calm and serene. Abdu'l-Baha, Paris Talks.
Okay, so that's Theravada Buddhism. Now what about Mahayana Buddhism? In this case, the doctrine of the three bodies of the Buddha, the Trikaya, has correspondences with the Baha'i teachings. The concept of Trikaya embodies the view that the Buddha is one with the Absolute, but manifests himself in the world of the relative, samsara, in order to carry out his aim of liberating all beings. The Dharmakaya is the Buddha in the true nature of the Buddha, which is identical with the Absolute. The Sambhogakaya is the body of the Buddha in his heavenly paradise. And the Nirmanakaya is the body of the Buddha appearing to human beings. And one of the things I was just reading the other day suggested that you could also match that up with the Trinity in Christianity. So the Nirmanakaya would be the life of the sun, and then the Sambhogakaya would be the realm of the Holy Spirit, and then the Father would correspond to the Dharmakaya. It's a bit of a rough comparison, but I think it's got some value. So, applying Baha'u'llah's correction, we would see the statements about the Dharmakaya as referring to the Buddha as the primal will, the first emanation from the ultimate reality. The Sambhogakaya could then be understood as the manifestation of God in his trans-historical reality, the station in which these manifestations are, quote, all abiding in the same tabernacle, soaring in the same heaven, seated upon the same throne, uttering the same speech, and proclaiming the same faith. And that's from Gleanings. The Nirmanakaya, for its part, would correspond to the historical reality of each manifestation of God. And here's the description from the Gleanings. Let me see. Maybe Eva can, if she's still got a voice, can read this one for us.
You have to unmute yourself, Eva. Thank you.
Sorry about it. The other station is the station of distinction. It pertaineth to the world of creation and to limitations thereof. In this respect, each manifestation of God has a distinct individuality, a definitely prescribed mission, a predestined revelation, and specially designated limitations. Each one of them is known by a different name, is characterized by a special attribute, fulfills a definite mission, and it's entrusted with a particular revelation. Mm-hmm. Baha'u'llah Gleanings.
Okay, thank you. So taking all of these things into consideration, I have prepared a slightly revised version of the chart that I previously offered you in class number 8. So here are the 5 realms of being mentioned by Baha'u'llah when they're compared with the 3 bodies of the Buddha. This comparison is largely based on Mujan Moment's article, The Baha'i Approach to Other Religions, the Example of Buddhism. And I seem to remember it was Harold that had suggested that we compare Hahut with Dharma Dhatu when we first mentioned this. And I've checked with Momen very carefully about these. It seems that Dharmakaya would correspond to both Lahut and Jabarut. So Nirmanakaya is the physical world. Sambhogakaya is really the angelic realm, if you call it. This is where not only do we go there at night when we're dreaming, we also go there in the next world. That's our next stop. And then Dharmakaya, this is Jabarut, where Thomas Breakwell was able to ascend, and perhaps some other Baha'is will eventually go there as well. Although they don't prepare a list and say, hey, in the last year, these are the people who made it to, it's not like that. It's not a competition, but you get the idea. So this is still fairly tentative, although I feel more confident about it than I did the last time I presented it. Okay, so let's go back here. One of the keys to unlock the unity underlying the differences between the world's religions can be found in Shoghi Effendi's declaration that religious truth is not absolute but relative. And maybe this time we can ask Lori if she would read number 18 for us.
Reading number 18. It's the Baha'i Faith's teachings revolve around the fundamental principle that religious truth is not absolute, but relative, that divine revelation is progressive, not final. Unequivocally and without the least reservation, it proclaims all established religions to be divine in origin, identical in their aims, complementary in their functions, continuous in their purpose, indispensable in their value to mankind. Shoghi Effendi, The World Order of Baha'u'llah.
Okay, nicely read. So, as we learned in the second class of Part 3, statements such as this form the foundation for Harold's proposal of a new way of looking at religious diversity, which he labeled progressivism. Given the importance of this new worldview, I believe it is worth reading the relevant passage of his 2010 book, Founders of Faith, again. And since Harold is here, it would only make sense that he would read this out for us.
My internet is unstable, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
Progressivism as a religious worldview sees major religions as linked and sequential as part of a divine plan to educate humanity. This perspective contains elements of inclusivism and pluralism. Like inclusivism, it sees its own faith as a culmination of previous religious eras, but unlike inclusivism, it says that higher revelation and wider loyalties will definitely unfold in the future. Like pluralism and universalism, it sees many virtues in the family of faiths, but unlike pluralism and universalism, progressivism feels obligated to unite under the highest of all authorities, God's latest guidance. Progressivism says that all religions have one source and so will eventually merge, but they should be guided by the latest revelation. When humanity learns to see beyond cultural particulars, discerning that revelations are offered at intervals of about 500 to 1,000 years, then both earlier and later religions appear more clearly as part of one providential process that is deeply developmental.
That's stunning, Harold. That really was a great improvement to the world of religious studies. I love this deeply developmental statement. I'm going to have a lot to say about this when we come to Ken Wilber in the fall. This central developmental principle that religious truth is not absolute but relative, and that it is progressive in nature, led Shoghi Effendi to the conclusion that the Baha'i Faith is not the final revelation from God. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we've had everybody read at least once. So maybe we'll come back to Margaret now. Number 20.
It should also be borne in mind that great as is the power manifested by this revelation, and however vast the range of the dispensation its author has inaugurated, it emphatically repudiates the claim to be regarded as the final revelation of God's will and purpose for mankind. To hold such a conception of its character and functions would be tantamount to a betrayal of its cause and a denial of its truth. It must necessarily conflict with the fundamental principle which constitutes the bedrock of Baha'i belief, the principle that religious truth is not absolute but relative, that divine revelation is orderly, continuous, and progressive, and not spasmodic or final. Shoghi Effendi, The World Order.
All right. That's such a great statement. Okay. So Shoghi Effendi identified a number of implications flowing from this principle. The following passage essentially charts the course for the Baha'i Faith's ongoing relationships with its past predecessors and its future successors. Okay. Well, David Erickson, how would you like to start us off here? That's number 21.
Okay, number 21. The revelation, of which Baha'u'llah is the source and center, abrogates none of the religions that have preceded it, nor does it attempt, in the slightest degree, to distort their features or to belittle their value. It disclaims any intention of dwarfing any of the prophets of the past, or of the whittling down, or of the whittling down the eternal verity of their teachings. It can in no wise conflict with the spirit that animates their claims, nor does it seek to undermine the basis of any man's allegiance to their cause. It's declared its primary purpose is to enable every adherent of these faiths to obtain a fuller understanding of the religion with which he stands identified, and to acquire a clearer apprehension of its purpose. It is neither eclectic in the presentation of its truth, nor arrogant in the affirmation of its claims. Shoghi Effendi, The World Order of Baha'u'llah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So notice that its primary purpose is to enable every adherent of these faiths to obtain a fuller understanding of the religion with which he stands identified. In other words, to deepen their understanding of their own religion. As we saw in a previous class, this appears to have been Abdu'l-Baha's methodology in his dozens of talks during his 8th-month visit to North America in 1912. This is such a significant theme that the Guardian addressed it more than once. And so perhaps Belinda can read number 22 for us.
Still unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay. Far from aiming at the overthrow of the spiritual foundations of the world's religious systems, the Baha'i Faith, avowed its unalterable purpose is to widen their basis, to restate their fundamentals, to reconcile their aims, to reinvigorate their life, to demonstrate their oneness, to restore the pristine purity of their teachings, to coordinate their functions, and to assist in the realization of their highest aspirations. These divinely revealed religions, as a close observer has graphically expressed it, are quote, are doomed not to die, but to be reborn. Does not a child succumb in the youth, and the youth in the man, yet neither child nor youth perishes. I don't know who it's quoting there. Shoghi Effendi, World Order of Baha'u'llah.
So in these two key passages, the Guardian has provided us with clear guidelines as to how members of the Baha'i Faith are to relate to other religions.
Mm-hmm.
Crystal clear. So let's talk about this word that he uses, relative truth. Some of you will be aware of the fact that recent Baha'i scholarly opinion is rather divided on exactly what Shoghi Effendi meant by the word relative. A fascinating dialogue has ensued. However, I've reluctantly chosen not to include it in this course. I may well develop a 2 or 3 session talk for a later time. To give a quick summary, Mujan Momin initiated the conversation way back in 1988 with an article called Relativism, a Basis for Baha'i Metaphysics. There he advanced the thesis that Shoghi Effendi's his word relative is best understood as meaning relativity. He refined his argument in his 1999 book, The Phenomenon of Religion, and even further in a profound article called The God of Baha'u'llah in 2003. 20 years later, after the original article. In 2008, the Canadian Baha'i philosopher Ian Kluge from BC responded with his own article, Relativism in the Baha'i Writings. There he identifies a host of problems with this loaded philosophical term and ends up suggesting that relationalism is a more appropriate alternative. In 2017, in Baha'u'llah and the Luminous Mind, Roland Faber critiques Momen's reliance on the relativity lens, identifying non-dualism as the goal beyond the dualism and monism pairing that he had identified. He considers Buddhism's luminous mind and Baha'u'llah's uncompounded reality as synonyms, transcending these two opposing views. Finally, in 2018, the American Baha'i scholar of religion Peter Terry wrote The Oneness of Reality, a response to Mujan Momen, in which he critiques several of the pieces of evidence Momen used to support his thesis. Terry maintains that the word relative is better replaced with the word progressive, in the sense of progressive revelation. So for those interested in pursuing this ongoing dialogue, I've provided a chronological bibliography of the articles with links in which the discussion has occurred. All but one of them has a link, and that is this item right here. So there's a summer's worth of reading for those of you who are keen. I think you'll find it a very worthwhile subject to get into if you choose to do that. But if you don't, I would really recommend this number 5 as a standalone. It is positively brilliant. You'll get a warm, fuzzy feeling out of it, for sure. It is really something else. Okay, now let me just move along
Mark,
here.
in reading 22, as far as I know, the Guardian is quoting George Bernard Shaw.
Ah, you found it.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go back there. That's number 22. Whoops, let me see. Does not the child succumb in the youth, and the youth in the man?
I can't tell you where, but it's in his letters, and
oh, boy,
I think so. I'll check it out later to see if I can find it.
I wonder if he came across that when he was at Oxford.
Probably.
Interesting. Okay. So, I'm just going to turn. No, I'm not going to turn this off just yet. I had originally planned to deliver one further class in this part of the ARC course. However, as I reconsidered the material I was intending to use, I came to the conclusion that it didn't advance the subject enough to devote another week to it. So that means that tonight is our final session on Buddhism and the Baha'i Faith. But before we wrap up this part, I want to share an email I received from Harold a couple of months ago. As you will see, he identifies a number of errors or distortions of the Buddha's teachings that have been introduced over the centuries. And they are well worth our careful examination, although we don't really have time tonight to do much with them. So the whole email is worth reading, but here are the examples. There are 10 here that are the product of his years of reflection on interfaith dialogue, Baha'i studies, and Buddhism, obviously. So, Harold, did you want to say anything further about that at the moment?
I just would invite people to think about all the things that Christians have said and think of all the varieties of Christians, people from, rather strict, you might say fundamentalist points of view. They've sort of interpreted Christianity in a lot of different ways, and you could list a lot of their claims that would be inconsistent with. Anyway, I think a similar thing has happened in Buddhism. Buddhism took many different forms. And in fact, the varieties of Buddhism may be even wider than the varieties of Christianity. And so I just listed some things that I've heard Buddhists say or even write. And to me, they look inconsistent with what the Buddha actually taught. If I use the Tripitaka, the three baskets, the earliest and most authentic of all the Buddhist writings, and I found things in there, the Tripitaka, that contradicted some of the things you hear Buddhists say. So, and yet I don't bring this up when I'm talking to Buddhists very much. But my main point is, over the years, there are distortions that creep in. And based on all the things that Mark has been telling us, prejudices, or a manifestation. So we have our favorite parts of it. So we lift up one part and deny other parts. So there's lots of distortion that creeps in. And I just picked out what I think are some of the most common distortions. That Buddha was an ordinary human being who attained enlightenment, etc. I won't read them all. But I think the biggest one here is that Buddha taught no concept of the divine. I think it's more correct to say he taught a very impersonal concept of higher reality or transcendent reality. That's far from saying he has no concept of the divine, or Buddhists don't believe in God. They don't believe in God in a personal sense, but impersonal or transcendent notions about reality abound in Buddhism. So anyway, I just listed some things to challenging. They're going to have to teach world religion in public education all over the world and show that different terms are used by different faith traditions and scriptural traditions that point to pretty much the same thing. The biggest one, I might pick on number 10. Buddha's teaching shares no significant common ground with Abrahamic religions. So even Moman said that. He said, at least that's the way it looks. And to me, it doesn't look that way. Because, for example, the Abrahamic traditions say we should align with the will of God. Buddha said we should align with the Dharma. Now, if you unpack what aligning means, and you unpack what Dharma means, and you unpack what the will of God means, you'll see that those are highly consistent. If you look at right conduct and the 5 precepts, they will sound very different. For example, Buddha gave advice to kings, which basically said, take care of the poor and, help overcome suffering. There's a doctrine of social justice in Buddhism that's, to me, highly parallel with the Abrahamic traditions. If this were not the case, a king like Ashoka and another king in India and another king, Taizong, in China, who embraced Buddhism and wanted it to be integrated with Chinese wisdom as much as possible, they wouldn't have been able to create, very advanced social systems. So Buddhism has plenty that can be used to build civilization. And that's why it had a huge impact all across Asia. Anyway, to me, there's lots of complementarity between the Abrahamic tradition and Buddhism. And yet it's something brand new to a lot of people who come across Buddhism, and it feels very, very different than the Western religions. Anyway, enough on that. Thank you.
That's really, really useful. Yeah, I could see that these points being very useful when it comes to trying to root out the prejudices of a tradition that has been around for many, many centuries. To get them to see the truth underlying some of those practices and doctrines that they worship.
But you know, Mark, it's a very mixed bag because it's a kind of a minefield, because even Abdu'l-Baha gave a very severe critique of Buddhism, which you didn't quote, but he said it was like an old man that was decrepit and so on. It was a very strongly worded statement.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that Buddhism did go off the track in some respects. Otherwise, Abdu'l-Baha would never have made that critique. But when I read the Dhammapada, for example, and I have a number of books here on Buddhism, like you do and other people have, Harold has, and Harold studied it more than I have, that's for sure, where I find a complete compatibility is in the ethical teachings on how to conduct yourself and adjusting the mind, so to speak, to get, a peaceful mind and a peaceful life. Those teachings are very illuminating. You can read the Dhammapada for yourself. Mm-hmm. And, that's where I find this oneness at the ethical core that Abdu'l-Baha talks about. If you look at the theologies and the worldviews, they're all different because these are man-made and they're different temperaments, as you pointed out. Baha'u'llah said the same thing in the Seven Valleys. He talked about the differences in human temperaments and how people interpret things relative, there's that relativity again, relative to their own way of looking at things. We all interpret things through our own framework. But when you compare the ethical teachings, there's a great commonality there with Buddhism. Like when I read this material, I go, yes, 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 that makes sense. Yes, yes. That is wisdom. Mm. And on the ethical teachings about, because Buddhism is essentially a religion that tells us that we have to adjust our mind to reality. And when you make that adjustment, suffering will, to a large extent, disappear or be dissipated. So Buddhism is a religion which is largely about eliminating suffering, especially psychological suffering. And compassion was one of the ways to do that, because that's why he's called the compassionate Buddha. That's why the Dalai Lama says, if you want to be happy, practice compassion. So I just wanted to, the other point I wanted to quickly make, Mark, to underscore what you said about how the mystics go wrong completely when they talk about becoming unified with God. This is a very important point because many of them have made the claim, whether in Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, that in the mystical state, in the rarefied mystical state, they become one with the divine being. And Baha'u'llah says that is a complete error, that they would be completely consumed like a wood chip would be consumed if you threw it in the face of the sun. Nobody could bear to be united with God. You would be instantly consumed, Baha'u'llah says. And he says at the most, there's two possibilities here. Either they're uniting with their own soul at the highest level. In other words, they are tapping into the normally untapped resources of the higher levels of the human soul, or they're experiencing a unity with the divine manifestation, with Christ or with Buddha or Krishna or whatever. So that's very important, because this claim to becoming one with God is a very big one, and it's led the mystics and all of the traditions, we can say the Sufis, for example, in Islam, to have great followings. I mean, of hundreds and thousands of people. It used to be in the 19th century, some of these Sufi orders, the leaders of the Sufi orders had legions and legions of followers. And some of these were based on this claim of being united with God. And Baha'u'llah says that does not happen. Only God unites with God. Even the manifestation of God does not penetrate that essence of divinity. So even though, I mean, Mark, you were right to point this out, even though Islam gives us a much more magnificent view of the transcendence of Allah, of God, Baha'u'llah takes it even further. And he says, basically, God is outside the system. You think he's in the system, he's not even in the system. What makes the system function is the divine manifestation, is the prophet. And he's in touch with God. He's the divine medium between humanity and mankind. So we can see how Baha'u'llah takes that was it Tanzil you said, Mark?
Tanzi.
Tanzi. He even takes the Tanzi, or this transcendent element, to a much higher degree than we even find in Islam. The oneness, the superb oneness of God, it's very, very exalted in the Baha'i faith. You know, I worked with a couple of teachers who, two ladies, and I used to have very interesting, Lynn and Lisa, spiritual discussions with them. And one day, one of them said to me, you know, I think you put too much importance on these prophets that you talk about, they said to me. And of course, as you pointed out, Mark, this is very, very a fundamental principle of Baha'i teaching or Baha'i theology, that we need to go through the manifestations, because regardless of what people claim, there can be no direct intercourse between the human and God. That's impossible, Baha'u'llah says. So we need a teacher.
So, okay, so I wanted to end off with, we've run out of time already, but maybe we can consider this homework. I'm doing this for Lori, actually. Let me come back to the screen sharing. I was going to have a class at the end where we had something similar to what we had at the end of part 2, where we had everybody break up into groups and talk about these profound questions that I'm asking here. But we don't have time to do that. So, and we probably don't have time to even discuss them tonight. But anyway, let me just run through them. In the first question, in what general or specific ways has our examination of Buddhist meditation practices, especially as practiced within the Mahayana and Vajrayana vehicles, helped you to more deeply understand Abdu'l Baha's stages of the soul as described in his commentary on the Surah of Rum? And that, of course, is our fundamental point that we're trying to illuminate. And secondly, has your view of the most appropriate ways to relate to other world religions changed as a result of our discussions regarding Buddhism and the faith? And be as specific as you can. So, if you have any thoughts on either of those questions, I would be very curious to read them at some point. There's no time limit on that. There's no page length that I'm expecting, but if you feel moved to respond in any way to either of those questions, it doesn't have to be both, I would love to read it. So, having said that, now we can stop with the presentation and see whether you want to speak anymore. We're already 5 minutes over our time, so I can understand if you don't want to. But let me know how you're feeling. So what we're going to do is have a break so that I can research Ken Wilber. And I'm really going to go easy on myself. I'm giving myself the rest of the spring and the summer to read him because he's got a great deal of material and it's at a very high level. So, but in the meantime, Linda and I have been discussing the possibility of having a garden party at our house towards the end of June. If we're allowed to gather outside, we're thinking of having a potluck dinner or something. It's unfortunately going to exclude the people in the West.
Oh, I thought Joy and Alan were coming. Gosh.
Well, maybe we could twist their arm. I don't know, but
We'll have a computer on and we'll zoom them in.
yeah.
And then we can come by and say hi. It'll be fun.
How about a trip out east?
That would be good. But we went to a Zoom wedding. It was a combination in-person Zoom wedding last weekend. Worked just fine.
All right.
It's a hybrid.
Yeah, it's a hybrid.
Well, I guess we could do that.
Or we could come east.
So anyway, we're talking about the third or fourth week of June. We haven't really decided that yet, but we'll keep you informed. But I think it would be great to see some people face to face. Can you imagine what that would be like? Oh, I'm so sick of Zoom, you can't believe it.
Yeah, and it'll be outside in the fresh air where there's less danger of aerosol infection and all that stuff. But Mark, I must admit in advance, I'm going to fail question 1.
Oh, you're going to fail it.
Oh, I'm clueless on question 1.
Oh, okay. Well, don't answer that one. But anyway, that you could see the things that are structuring the whole course, right? These are some of the things.
Question 1. I'm going to make you.
Okay, let's see what you have to say. Do you want to share anything now? Just have you already got an answer? Or?
No, but I love charts. I mean, remember when we did Aurobindo and those 12? You see, there's always something corresponding. They're talking about one reality. There have to be.
Absolutely.
Not that I understand it precisely, but I'm not in doubt that there's correspondences. Is that it? For example, the word water. How many words can you use in different languages that mean water? They have to point to something in common, right? So anyway, I just have this infinite faith that a wonderful diagram could be created that would show correlations between Buddhist concepts and what Abdu'l-Baha said about the stages of the soul. No doubt about it.
Yeah, that's my intuition
my
too.
Own interpretation.
Yeah.
Are you working on it, Harold?
Of that, but it's certainly hypothetical. You could show correspondences to be discussed. No doubt about it.
Great. Yeah.
Man after my own heart. That's fantastic. That's where I'm going with this. So, Belinda, you're going to say something, but you're muted. You're still talking.
Did you unmute Belinda?
Belinda!
We can't hear you.
We haven't heard a word you said.
Belinda, unmute thyself.
I think David's in charge of that.
Oh, David.
Uh-oh. Computer problem. We're hanging on with bated breath.
Oh, too bad.
What's going on there, David?
Linda, you can't unmute them, eh?
No, I just looked. I don't have that option, apparently.
Weird.
Yeah.
What's going
Too
on?
bad.
Put it in the chat.
We're muted. Unmuted.
Oh!
There you go.
Hey, what
David
happened?
lost the screen, so we couldn't see, but we could hear you, and we thought you could hear us until we found out you couldn't.
I don't know how that happened, but anyway.
Yeah,
Okay, so what were you going to say?
I don't remember. I love the idea of a garden party. Absolutely thrilled.
You like the party idea?
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
good.
That'd be great to see you.
Yeah. Well, I've never met Marie, for instance, in person. I would love to do that. I have never met Margaret. So, yeah, it would be fantastic to do that.
Margaret, I haven't seen in years.
Margaret.
Oh, not too sure.
Look forward to seeing her again.
You're embarrassing her, Jack. I don't know why, but.
Well, I'm just saying
You're
it's been
muted,
a long
Margaret.
time since we've seen
Mark,
some of
my
the
wife says
friends.
it's dinner time.
Is it? Okay.
Bye.
Take care of yourself.
Well, glad the move is over. Glad the move is over.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah.
No, I just meant by that it's been
I will
years
bring
since
my famous cookies.
we've seen some people face to face, like Joey and Alan, like Margaret.
Mhm.
We'll make a sound.
You will.
And Hangame,
For salad.
Ingrid.
We can take a beautiful salad. You make.
So, if you don't like those two questions, I have another question for you. Should we continue with another section or not? Another part of the arc.
What do you mean?
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Should I spend all the time necessary to create another part of this course, this time on Ken Wilber?
Oh yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Sure.
Please.
Is there an appetite for it? That's
Oh,
what I
yeah.
need to know.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't know. It's a lot of work, right? So-
It is.
Hey, you
Well,
started it.
he's still alive, so we can, maybe you can even ask him questions that he might answer. So
Well, I've thought about that in the past, but I never have.
Well, why not?
I'm sure he'd answer your email.
Give it a whirl. I'd like to tell you, if I can, about a program we heard this afternoon. I think it was, Tapestry.
Tapestry, yeah.
Tapestry.
Yeah. And she was interviewing a Christian minister about why he, believes Christianity is the only religion that's worthwhile. And he was very interesting how open he was to understanding and knowledge of other religions. But when push comes to shove, only Jesus died and resurrected. So, okay. But in the course of the interview, she said something about, well, what about other religions like Islam, Buddhism, and Baha'i?
Yeah.
Now, he didn't pick up on Baha'i, but I thought, what? How come she mentioned Baha'i?
What's her name again?
Mary Hines.
Mary Hines.
Yeah. Mary Hines. Mary Hines.
But he didn't pick up on that either. And when he did mention other religions, he mentioned, Sikhism and Islam and Buddhism, but he didn't pick up on Baha'i either. But I thought it was extraordinary that she mentioned Baha'i.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And Belinda, it was strange that man said about the other religions, even though he seemed to be tolerant about them. He said, well, don't even bother trying to learn because there's just too much to learn about other religions. It's hard enough to learn about one religion. But that's exactly what we have to do.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, well, in one sense, he's right. But he did comment that not many people know much about other religions. And I thought, I wonder how much you know. He does seem to know a fair amount, all things considered.
Well,
but I mean, I was saying he hasn't talked to too many Baha'is because we are relative, there's that word again, to many other people, pretty knowledgeable about different religions. In fact, I came across a person remarking that be careful when you're talking to Baha'is, they know more about Christianity than you do.
So that's dangerous.
But I would agree that with his point that there is a great deal to know about each religion, and so if you're talking to them in a respectful way, you've got to spend some time doing that. I mean, look at how much time you guys have devoted to what I would consider to be sort of a first-year university course on Buddhism.
Yeah.
There's a great deal yet to be understood about that that we could, take another course and dive into it at a higher level. But I don't think there's the appetite to do that, frankly.
Not right now.
But you can see that there's a great deal of depth there, if anybody gets interested.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill, what's on your mind here?
I was just triggered there. It made me kind of realize that this is the value that Mark Keedwell brings, and I don't really mind how much work he has to do.
Lots of work.
But I think that we've been talking very much about really the Baha'i worldview and its relationship with the worldview of Buddha, and that and that helps us form our relationships with other faith groups. And the inverse of that is these other groups learning more about the Baha'i faith. And what you're doing when you're presenting what you're presenting is you're offering both the relation, the axis of the relationship between the Baha'i faith and, in this case, Buddhism, but you're also offering with the same video, so to speak, you're offering that same thing in inverse to the Buddhist faith, and these things just aren't out there so that people like what Dave was referring to, that go on the radio and say, nobody knows nothing, so what I know must be right, are getting away with that. And so I think when I heard this, listening to this discussion, I'm like, this is exactly why this is extremely valuable, what you're doing and what the people who are participating in bringing these realities, or these thoughts as a group, and elevating the overall perspective and broadening and deepening what we know about how much that this is something that is also available to others to circumvent this kind of ignorance that is out there and is essentially accepted as being like okay. So I just really think you ought to appreciate this to the extent that you don't notice how hard work it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is hard work. All the word, Mark.
Well, as long as that's clear, just want everybody to know. Then I can go ahead and I'm 500 pages into Sexicology and Spirituality by Ken Wilber. So I've only got 300 to go. And then there's his new book, which is the same length. And then there are 5 others I want to read of his. And then there are the critiques of him that I've been stumbling upon. So there's a great deal to cover.
Sure is, yeah.
We don't mind.
Yeah. Go for it.
Mark, your great service is if we compare what you're doing with other religions, and other religions, people charge hundreds and hundreds of dollars for courses like this, and you're doing it all for service to your co-religionists. And so, our thanks are deep and profound. And I know how many hours you must spend, reading, analyzing, and putting your notes together. It's really a sacred study, what you're doing, and it's an act of supreme devotion, and we all appreciate it very deeply.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, why don't we call it a night and look forward to our email. We'll probably send it out about a month ahead of time so that everybody can make their plans, change their lives accordingly so that they can come to our garden party.
Don't forget to allow for weather and have an alternate date.
Oh, yeah, we could do that too. Thank you. Smart. Yeah.
If I've learned anything, it's that the weather will let you down at the last minute.
Well, we always have an inside, so we could do that too. By then the masks won't be necessary and all the mandates will be done.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Right.
It'll be a post-COVID world.
We'll be talking about the 7th wave or the 8th wave by that time.
Oh God, let's hope not.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been great having you all together in this space. I'm looking forward to doing it again, but hopefully in the fall we can do it as a hybrid. I would love to get back to actually seeing people that we're talking with and then sharing it with those who are too far away.
Yeah, I'm glad you're thinking about hybrids.
Oh yeah.
I'm a real believer in hybrid.
Yeah.
That would be great. Has Bill got his hand up again, or is that from before, Bill?
No, that's before.
Oh, okay.
And I have to let you know that that was one of my specialties when I was working at Algonquin, was helping people create hybrid courses.
Yep.
So I know something about this. So it's going to be great. Anyway, good night, everybody.
Night. Thank you, Mark.
Wonderful to see you all.
Take care, stay well, stay safe, and stay sane.
Have a good summer, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have a
See you
good
in
summer.
June.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.